Good day and welcome back to Below the Curve Gaming. So today we've a new mission for you from the ITS Season 13 pack, and it's Frontline. So we've got the board set up here, and Frontline is a little bit different in that there's no antennae, there's no Penelopes, there's no tech coffins. It's simply about getting as far across the table as you can, whilst also holding other segments. So the table at the end of the game gets split into 3 sectors. There's one which is along the centre line. It's 4 inches off either side, so it's a total of 8 deep. Then there's one 8 deep to one side of it and one 8 deep to the other. So it's a 24-inch no man's land split into 3 that goes the length of the table. So the victory points for this are 1 if you dominate the sector closest to your table edge, 2 if you dominate the centre table sector, and 3 if you dominate the one furthest away from you. So that gives you a total of 6. Now there's 4 classified objective cards, which can take you up to 10, but you are allowed to cash 1 card in, and you have to announce this after you've chosen your objectives, but before the game begins. You can cash the card in, as it were, using the support rule. And what that allows you to do is add the score on the card to your points in any of the sectors at the end of the game. Now, it's only any one sector, so you have to obviously choose carefully. If you have baggage, then, and that will come on some remotes, that can add an extra 20 points to the score for that sector. Now you have to bear in mind that most things with baggage are very cheap, but it does take them up to sort of round about 30-point mark. It uses the Antarctic Territory rule, which is troops with terrain total, terrain mountain or climbing plus gain +1 to their first move stat. So if you had a heavy infantry who was 6-2, they would go up to 7-2. So that's the only actual rules of the game. Neither of us are playing Shavasti, so we don't need to worry about going through that rule. The game is Panoceania Military Order against Vanilla 012. So we'll be back in a second to have a look at the deployment zones. Ben has won the dice roll and has elected to go second. And we'll also have a look at the armies.
Hello, this is Ben, and this is my 012 force for Frontline. I've done some painting through the week to get a few models finished off in preparation for this game. We've got some new terrain to show off as well, which is the Panoceania workshop, I believe, in the UK. So we've got some of their grey market buildings, which are kind of street traders, kind of black market. We've got some of their Avalon Communications kind of acrylic and photo paper kind of buildings, which have MDF underneath but have some nice kind of photo pictures, and then acrylics to really brighten up the board. And then we've got their Suburban Office 2, I believe, including interior, and our metro station on the board so far. We do have quite a lot of other buildings to build up, so we're hoping to get them done for the following game, but they're quite time consuming to build these buildings. The Suburban Office took me a good 2-3 hours last night, so didn't get quite as much built as I was hoping. Anyway, on to the faction. So starting off, I have a bronze with multi-rifle, who has climbing plus, and due to the Antarctic Territory special rule, he will move up to 5-4 for this match, so it'll be good for moving him up the board, making the most of his armour and high BTS with multiple wounds. Next model I've painted up is the Cyber Ghost at the back, which is the hacking device plus profile I've taken. Also comes with a picture, which I'm looking forward to trying out. And one of the other new models I've painted is Hippolyta. I haven't used her so far, so I'm really looking forward to getting her on the board. She's got breaker combi rifle, nano pulsar, flash pulse, eclipse grenades, which will allow me a bit of zero visibility, which is one of the things I was missing in some of the previous games. At the back here, I've painted up Parvati, who's an engineer and a doctor. Doctor 2 wounds, an engineer +3. So I'm hoping she'll be able to complete some of my classified objectives. I have 2 kappas. First one at the front is my kappa lieutenant, and then I have a basic kappa at the back. And then I have a raptor who is a forward observer, and he's got the peripheral diva bot with a heavy flamethrower. Gone for the multi-rifle profile for the raptor. Moving on to combat group 2, I have an Oko remote, which comes with a combi rifle, flash pulse, and para-CC weapon, also a forward observer. And then the Millicent remote with the missile launcher. I found it to be really useful in the previous game, so it's making a reoccurrence. I have a Crusher with forward deployment of +8, and it's got submachine gun, nanopulsar, decharges profile, and also a forward observer, yet again to get those specialists in for the potential classified objectives. And finally, I have a Psycop hacker with a combi rifle, nanopulsar +1 burst, also a specialist operative as well as the hacking. So I'm hoping with the force to be able to make the most of my classified objectives. I've drawn 4. First one is nano espionage, which will require an engineer, doctor, paramedic, or data tracker. So realistically, it's going to be Parvati that's going to be able to do that. I'll have to declare, I think, a data tracker for the game. So I'll have to work that out before we do the first turn. I have extreme prejudice to complete a coup de grace against an unconscious or on embryo enemy model. It's also worth 20 points, so I may use it as my Intelcom card. I have data scan, which requires a hacker, so I've got the Cyber Ghost or the Psycop hacker. And finally, I have mapping, which is a forward observer or hacker in contact with a scenery building or item entirely within their deployment zone. So I'm going to have to really push up the board to get that, or use it for secure HVT or Intelcom card. So that's my force. We'll see what Martin's taken for his military orders.
So here we have the military order force. So it's 300 points on the nose, 6 SWCs, and 12 orders split across 2 pools. So the lieutenant is a Knight Hospitaller here at the front. Behind him we have 2 doctors, both with combi rifles, and we have an HMG. And then we have an Order Sergeant hacker. So this forms my core fire team with 2 doctors in it. This is quite important, and we'll come to this in a minute. We also have an Infirmary of St. Lazarus. Now she has the boarding shotgun, and that's my 3rd doctor. We have a fire team Harry of 3 Teutonic Knights. So on the right hand side we have the special operative with the SMG, just in case. We have the Teutonic Knight with the light shotgun, and then I realise he's actually standing here. We have one with a missile launcher. We then have an Order Sergeant with a heavy rocket launcher. He's not part of the fire team Harry. We will sort that in a minute. An Order Pool 2 is a pair of Bulletier arm bots. So the one with the white nose, as it were, is the Spitfire, and the one with the blue nose is the heavy shotgun. So they are there for the order efficiency. They've got mimetism, which is really, really good, and it's mimetism -6, more to the point. They can't advance deploy or anything fancy like that, but they are repeaters. They'll scuttle up the table and hopefully pin down Ben's force. Then we've got our HVT, and she will hopefully be deployed. I've got the fire deployment zone. I'm going to try and deploy her well out of line of sight, because I've noticed that Ben keeps going for the secure HVT classified objective, and I'm thinking I might actually have to do that myself, so I need to be careful that I keep my one safe. Now, we said we'd top at the classified objectives, so my classified objectives, and again, I'm not going to hover the camera on them due to screen glare, but I have experimental drug, so I have to heal somebody with a doctor. I have HVT inoculation, so I have to get to Ben's HVT with a doctor. Then I have HVT espionage, so I have to get to Ben's HVT with a hacker. So this team here is going to go hell for leather to get Ben's HVT. Now, HVT espionage is a whip -3, which is a bit tricky because Panoceania is not renowned for its high quality hackers, but it's still a 50-50 roll. The Order Surgeon is whip 13, so it's not the end of the world. It's just, we've seen this in the past, it can be a bit order intensive. Our final one is Predator. So Predator requires me to have taken out at least 2 enemy troopers in close combat, but you can't have performed a coup de grace. Now, I am playing a very combat-heavy army, but Ben's gone for some real heavy hitters. He's got Hippolyta, he's got a Bronze, which I'm always a bit wary of. He's got a Raptor, which comes with a Diva bot for heavy flamethrower, which is a worst-case scenario if you're trying to get him to hit somebody over the head with a sharp stick. He's got a Crusher, who can delay me. He's got Cyber Ghost, and Cyber Ghost are whip 14 hackers, really quite dangerous. And a Psychop as well. So I'm thinking I might actually cash that one in, except I can only get 9 points. And then it's worth 17. Use that to try and hold one of the sectors. I'm thinking that's actually a safer idea because as good as my troops are in combat, I really don't want to find my face getting smashed in by some of Ben's better stuff. Also, Ben has handed me a list that has 12 models in it, but I've discovered that O12 actually have a lot of hidden deployment, so I'm expecting there might be at least 1 if not 2 more models potentially waiting on me. So I don't really want to get caught out here. So we'll be back after the deployment and then it'll be on to the game.
So this is the O12 deployment. Starting left to right, I have the Capo Lieutenant behind the piece of terrain here. I have the Cyber Ghost with Picture and Hacking Device Plus. Then coming across here, I have Parvati backing up a Kappa with Combi Rifle. I have the Bronze. Then round here now, kind of in no man's land, but I'm hoping to get into contact. Unfortunately, my deployment zone ran out, but I have the Raptor and then the Diva Bot Peripheral. So on the building, I have the Millicent, although there's a few fire lanes facing it, including a Teutonic Knight with missile launcher on the double building over there. Round the building here, I have the Oko, and then at the far side of this building, I have Hippolyta. Now she's facing forward, unfortunately her cloak's in the way, but then the Cyclops Hacker. And then my final model is the Crusher. So I've decided to keep all 4 of my classified objectives, and plan with each one is the mapping one I'm going to attempt to complete with the Crusher. Data scan, I have either the Cyclops Hacker or the Cyber Ghost. Extreme Prejudice should be one that I can complete with any of my models as long as I can get into contact with an unconscious enemy. But potentially Hippolyta is quite brutal in combat, so she might be the best option for it. And then Nano Espionage is likely to be Parvati, although you get to choose a data tracker, so I've selected Hippolyta for that because you need to be engaged with an enemy specialist troop, so she probably gives me the best option for that. But I can always swap one out for secure HVT if needed.
So the Noble Knights are all set up and ready to go. We have our HVT, who has just evacuated herself from the Red Onisaki office block here. Now there's no nut line of fire to her, so if Ben wants to try any shenanigans, he'll have to come round and actually expose his troops to my fire teams, which will be quite important. We've got the fire team Harry here of the 3 Teutonic Knights, with the fire team leader being the missile launcher to start the game. They're backed up by the infirmary, who I held back, and by both the Bulletiers, with the Spitfire being the team leader to start the game. Up in the building, we have the Order Sergeant with a heavy rocket launcher. Then over here, we have the Night Hospitaller fire team. Now, we'll pan round to this in a moment. The leader currently is the HMG. We have one of the doctors, we have the hacker, and then if we go around here, we have the lieutenant with the multi-rifle, and we have the other doctor. Now, Ben round here has the Cyber Ghost. I'll have to be careful of him. Like I said earlier, he's a really good hacker. He could really shut down some of my stuff. He's got a Kappa, who I'm assuming is an Order monkey, but yet again could be Cho in disguise. Pravati, who needs to bite a bullet to the face as soon as possible because she is going to be a nightmare. She'll be able to repair his remotes on an 18 or less and Doctor on a 15 or less. So we're going to have to do really extreme prejudice to get rid of her. We've got another Kappa in front of her. Over here we've got Ben's HVT, who I'm going to have to get to because I've got multiple things that I need to do to her. That sounds a bit dodgy. We've got the Bronze providing some covering fire. He's got the multi-rifle. Over here we've got the Raptor and the Diva bot. As already identified, they could really ruin my day with their twin flamethrowers. The heavy from the Diva bot and the light from the Raptor. We've got the Millicent on the roof and then the Oko. And then we've got the Forward Observer, I believe, for the Crusher, which, if it can target things, is really going to make that Millicent dangerous. Then down here we've got the Psycop, hacker, and Hippolyta, who is facing forward, but due to her ostentatious evening wear, Ben's had to deploy her face in the wrong direction, but she is facing forward. Hippolyta's an absolute beast. Thankfully, she's only one wound with no wound in cap. So we're hoping that maybe a heavy hit from a missile launcher will take care of her. Need to bear in mind that the Bronze has immunity total, which means that missile launchers won't do anything particularly dangerous to him. And that, nor will the multi-rifle lieutenant, which actually makes the Bronze really, really difficult to get rid of. So that will have to be kept an eye on, because the other thing about that is that my double action close combat weapons will just be basic against him. So I did cash in Predator, as I suggested I was going to. It's worth 17 points, so I'm hoping that can make the difference in one of the quadrants. And let's get cracking and see how the game goes. Ben will probably reduce my order pool by 2. I'm really hoping he doesn't do it to the one that's only got the Bulletiers in it, because that would be quite crippling. So we will see you in a minute for the end of the first of the Panoceania turns. So it's the end of the military order first turn, and it has to be said it's been very successful. We started with the Bulletiers, who moved up to about here and opened up on the Crusher using the Spitfire, taking her out. We then moved the Teutonic fire team round about them in this sort of area here where they were safe from Ben's AROs before activating the Order Sergeant with a heavy rocket launcher, who got extremely lucky and managed to take out the Millicent that was up on the roof. Following this, the Hospitaller fire team moved up. There was no AROs because the terrain blocked the Bronze's line of sight, so I was quite lucky. Didn't take any double action rounds. They activated twice, moving up to sort of cover this alley here, and hopefully when the Cyber Ghost decides to make an appearance, they'll be able to gun him down with reckless abandon. I did, of course, completely forget that the hacker is movement 4-4, and so she's starting to lag behind a little bit. Then the Teutonic Knights moved up again. They managed to take down the Oko with a lucky shot from the missile launcher, and they also managed to drop the Diva bot. As they continued moving, because they were chewing through my orders at this point, they dropped a shot onto the Kappa, killing her outright, and with the blast taking a structure off Pravati, which was extremely fortuitous. And then, of course, things started to go a wee bit wrong, but I had so much luck that it was inevitable. I switched control of the fire team to the special operative of the SMG, moved up to attempt an assassination run on the hacker, which promptly resulted in having one chap immobilised, taking a wound as I discovered that all of Ben's stuff was incredibly difficult to hit and the submachine gun was not in an optimum range band. And so I ended up with an isolated member of the fire team and a wounded special operative. I then tried to shamelessly cheat by activating the isolated chap with an order so I could double tap Ben with a shotgun. But he was on hand with the rules book, and so instead I had to console myself with moving up my infirmary to try and sort the situation out. So it's the end of the first turn. Obviously I haven't scored any victory points because they're scored at the end, and as we know with my objective cards, I'm not in a position to do anything with them yet. I did just realise that the issue with the hacker was that I hadn't moved her second short move. That's been remedied. And we'll be back in a minute at the end of the O12 turn 1.
So here we are at the end of the O12 turn 1. I started by spending a command token, moving the Cyclops hacker to Combat Group 1 from Combat Group 2, as she was the only member that was still conscious in that combat group. I then used Hippolyta's impetuous order. She moved up and attempted to throw an Eclipse grenade. Unfortunately, she failed her fizz roll and took a shot from the order sergeant, but it missed, I believe. She spent an order. She moved up, managed to succeed with her Eclipse grenade, but took a wound to the light shotgun. The Teutonic Knight fire team Harris, which was down to 2 members, succeeded in its dodge roll around the corner. I then spent a further order to move into contact with the isolated Teutonic Knight, winning the face-to-face roll and dropping him unconscious with her explosive close combat weapon. I then, later in the turn, spent my final order on her to coup de grace him, shrugging off 2 shots from the Bulletier team and scoring for extreme prejudice. So I'll be 1 victory point up for that. I completed a coordinated order using the Bronze as the spearhead with Parvati and the Cyclops hacker. All 3 double moved, the Cyclops moving into contact with this terrain under the Eclipse grenade, the Bronze and Parvati moving into contact with the terrain in the centre. I spent an order on the Raptor, who has left its synchronized unconscious Diva bot behind, and double moved, moved and dodged, thankfully avoiding any damage from the order sergeant, and then used the lieutenant order to move into contact with the building over here. There was nothing in range or line of fire for the multi-rifle, but I've opened up a fire lane potentially for the Knight Infirmary or the Bulletiers moving around the corner. Final order was spent on this side, which the Cyber Ghost moved up and launched a pitcher, unfortunately failing despite being at +3, needing a 15, I believe. I rolled a 17. So that's the end of the O12 turn 1. It's currently 1 victory point to 0 in my favour, but we're now moving on to the military orders turn 2.
So it's the end of the military order turn 2. The turn started with the isolated Teutonic Knight, who was made a regular, moving up, taking on Hippolyta in close combat and managing to kill her. He got a critical hit with his double action close combat weapon. I then moved the 2 Bulletiers up, and after a short but frantic exchange of fire over the course of 2 orders, they took down the Raptor and they took out the Cyclops as well. The Infirmary moved up just to follow the Teutonic Knights. The fire team took 8 orders, piling up through the Grey Market They took down the Bronze with a lucky round of shooting from the HMG. A couple more orders were taken to move through the market and round the corner, where they took down both Parvati and the Cyber Ghost. It then took 4 orders for me to successfully hack the HVT for HVT espionage, giving me a victory point. And then the Doctor was able to inoculise the HVT, giving me my second victory point. So that's the end of the military order turn. I believe Ben is now in retreat, so the game will end at the end of this turn, after Ben's had his go.
So we are at the end of the O12 turn 2, and also the end of the game. So that is the end of the game there. It's currently 2 victory points to 1 in Martin's favour. However, he can dominate all 3 sectors unopposed, so he would be able to score a maximum of 8, -1 from the total of 10 due to using his Intelcom card, and -1 because one of his classified he says he can't score. So it would be most likely an 8-1 at the end of the game. So we'll come back with a quick wrap up of our thoughts on each of the lists.
So that was a particularly brutal and unfortunately very one-sided game. It did show, I feel, how strong the military order list can be. I know some people don't think it's the strongest list, but what you have is very reliable, pretty well statted infantry. You maybe don't have the greatest hackers, but you have access to a lot of doctors. In an ideal world, I would have an engineer, but unfortunately for this game, I didn't. The Bulletiers were a worthwhile investment. Mimetism -6 and a very versatile weapon loadout meant that they could slam up the table effectively. Shots, if not bouncing off them, certainly flying past them due to making it being so difficult to hit. Because between cover and the mimetism, you're at -9. The Teutonic Knights have that glorious thing the Tankos have of being really cheap, heavy infantry with, again, very generous loadout options. The missile launcher is fantastic. In a Fireteam Harry, it's 2 shots, and if a missile hits anything, you can pretty much kiss it goodbye. The Order Sergeant didn't do badly. He did exactly what I needed him to do, which was 15 points of sit in an advantageous position and just cause havoc. The Infirmary never got to roll a dice, but she was just there as a backup. And then the hefty fire team of the 4 Knight Hospitallers and the Hacker ploughed through when they had to. Now, I was quite lucky. They managed to get good lines of fire, so they weren't facing down lots of stuff. They didn't get hacked, because they're not the greatest. I mean, you do have the BTS of 6, but you then also have to consider that hacking attacks are either double action or AP, so they're not that reliable, and as soon as you start getting isolated, then you're in a world of trouble because all of a sudden your fire team starts to fall apart. But I was pleased with how the list performed, and I look forward to using it again with some newly painted options.
So unfortunately that was a bit of a humbling defeat for the O12. I had painted up a few new models to try out, and I felt my benefits from playing the game were quite limited in terms of what I managed to actually see these models do. So I didn't really learn much from the game either, unfortunately. So the Bronze, which was one of the models I wanted to try out as a replacement for the Gamma, partly because I want to go on to try and Starmada, and I was looking for a heavy infantry that might be a bit of a line breaker option for me, and the Gamma had proved so good in the previous game that I was hoping to see the Bronze do something similar. Perhaps choosing the multi-rifle option was not the best choice, but I felt in some of the fire lanes in the terrain I thought he would potentially be okay, and that there was more kind of contained with some of the buildings, that there was shorter kind of distances between the fire lanes, so I felt I'd maybe get a bit more out of him. Unfortunately, it proved to not be the case. He had one face-to-face roll, which was against the Knight Hospitaller heavy machine gun, and he was just taken out with some lucky rolling from Martin's point. The Cyber Ghost, who I was looking forward to trying out, particularly with the pitcher, failed with his one attempt to throw the pitcher, and it then kind of limited what I could do. I'd lost a few orders, unfortunately, with the remotes going down in turn 1 and the Kappa with combi rifle, so my options of what I could spend the orders on were a wee bit limited, and I was trying to push with Hippolyta to use her abilities to try and take something out in combat for the Extreme Prejudice classified objective. Hippolyta herself was a positive. I felt the inclusion of the eclipse grenades or smoke in general was something that had been sorely missing from the previous matches, so something I'll look to try again. Unfortunately, she's not available in Starmada, which is one of the benefits from taking the vanilla list. However, I felt perhaps I wasn't getting enough from the vanilla list to justify the lack of fire teams that I would get from Starmada. Parvati did nothing in the game, took a wound, moved up, and then took her further wounds, failing a dodge roll. She has Fizz 10, but she was facing the wrong direction. I was expecting he was going to move around the side of the buildings as opposed to come through the kind of square. So it was a bit disappointing. So I'm thinking I might look at a palette cleanser for the following match next week. I've got some Aleph and some Hack Islam that I've just picked up this month, so I'll maybe try something a wee bit different, either Starmada or one of those lists, or perhaps go back to the Ariadna for a game or two. I think I need to take a wee bit of a break from O12 and kind of mull over what choices I can make to try and get a wee bit better with them, because I don't think I've had the best A luck and B tactics so far. But thanks for watching. Any suggestions of what I can maybe try, please add them to the comment section below. As always, please check out our blog. I'm hoping to have some pictures up of Hack Islam once they're built up, and perhaps the Aleph as well, to kind of do a bit of a collecting blog with the Aleph on the blog page. At the moment, there's not been too many posts recently, so something I need to get a wee bit better with. We'll put a link to Helveticus Games in the description below with a 10% off voucher, and please like and subscribe, and we'll come back next week with a further game. Thanks.